Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
This is where we take, these really complex, sometimes overwhelming sources, articles, expert notes, all of it, and we try to boil them down into the essential knowledge you need.
Mm-hmm.
And today, we are doing a deep dive into what is probably the most uncomfortable topic we could possibly choose.
It's definitely up there.
Yeah, it's about getting the knowledge you never ever want to need,
Sure.
but that you absolutely will when you're facing loss and grief.
And that's such an interesting challenge for us, isn't it? Because usually when people go looking for information, they're motivated by something positive, a new skill, a way to make money, solving a problem they have right now.
Right.
This subject, though, end-of-life planning, funeral knowledge, just looking at it, comes with this immediate emotional cost. So we're really unpacking material, especially from a source called Finding Clarity in the Shadows of Grief, that looks at that resistance, head on.
Absolutely. And I know for me, Alex, this topic always had this weird superstition around it.
Oh, yeah.
Like if you think about it too much or plan for it,
Yeah.
you're somehow, I don't know, making it happen, inviting it in.
That's so common.
And that's the core truth, right?
Well, yeah.
The source points this out. Most of us just push thinking about funerals or wills or any of that logistical stuff off
Yeah.
until the emotional tsunami of a loss
Yeah.
just washes away any ability to think clearly.
And we have to start right there. We have to normalize that avoidance.
Mm-hmm.
It's completely understandable. It's a natural human defense mechanism, We are basically hardwired to push these huge existential threats and this profound discomfort as far away as possible into the abstract.
It always feels far away.
Exactly. Learning about the logistics of death is so emotional, and since loss always feels like a distant problem, the incentive to study the facts now is almost zero.
Yeah.
And that resistance, that's why the information is so often missing right when it is most desperately needed.
That normalization is so important because our mission for this deep dive is to kind of flip the script on that.
Mm-hmm. To reframe it.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to show you, based on the analysis in this material, why getting this knowledge ahead of time it's not morbid. It's not about expecting the worst. It is actually one of the highest forms of intelligent planning.
And compassionate self-care.
Yes. The whole goal here is to explain why building this foundation of knowledge now acts as a kind of protective shield, so that when that inevitable life event happens, you are grounded by facts, not completely paralyzed by panic.
So let's just dive right into that. Let's unpack that core conflict. The moment when that thing that was far away, that uncomfortable idea of loss, suddenly becomes your immediate and very demanding reality.
All right.
The source material, it just lays out this really sobering, undeniable truth. Everyone experiences significant loss. It is the only guaranteed human experience besides being born.
Nobody gets a pass.
Nobody. A parent, a spouse, a sibling, a really close friend, it will happen. So this is the fundamental universal knowledge that everybody needs, no matter how good they've been at ignoring that fact until now.
And what makes that avoidance so damaging is the state you're in when the inevitable finally arrives. You hear people say it all the time, right? No one is ever truly prepared for a death. And while, the emotional shock is always going to be there, even if it's after a long illness, the logistical preparedness, that's something else. That is entirely within our control, but we routinely neglect it.
And the consequence of that neglect is immediate. It hits you at your moment of peak vulnerability. The source describes it perfectly. You are overwhelmed, you are emotionally devastated by this acute grief, and suddenly you are pushed into the role of being a project manager.
Yeah, project manager for one of the most complex, time-sensitive, and honestly financially significant events your family will ever face.
And you are completely, utterly unsure of what to do next. Where do you even start?
That confusion.
Yeah.
The material says this is the greatest vulnerability. It's not just one crisis. It's like a crisis with layers.
A multi-layered crisis.
Right. First, you have the emotional crisis, to processing the loss itself. Then, bam, the logistical crisis hits. You realize you have this immediate, 72-hour timeline to make huge decisions.
Foundational decisions.
Yes, about disposition, documents, getting people coordinated. And then there's the third layer, the financial crisis.
Mm-hmm.
You start having to think about costs, but you have no reference point at all. Zero.
And that contrast is what creates this immense secondary stress. You have this incredibly high emotion crashing directly into the need for clear-headed, logical decision-making.
It's an impossible situation.
Think about the amount of information you have to absorb, instantly. You need to understand state laws about disposition. You have to choose between a direct cremation or a full traditional burial. You're trying to find and navigate legal documents like a will or a trust.
Locating life insurance policies.
Understanding what the medical examiner's role is, if there is one. Securing certified death certificates, which you'll need for everything.
And you have to learn all of this while you're also managing family dynamics, which can be tricky.
Oh, very tricky.
And your own sorrow. And then you have to communicate the news to this wide network of friends and family. I mean, we are talking about trying to learn the vocabulary of a specialized industry and its legal framework at the exact moment your brain's capacity to do that is just collapsing.
That's the cognitive reality we have to face. Research is very clear on this. During acute grief, the brain functions in a crisis state.
Right.
Your prefrontal cortex, that's the part that governs your executive functions, like abstract thought, planning, impulse control, short-term memory. It is significantly impaired.
You're flooded with stress hormones.
A huge surge of stress hormones. Cortisol, adrenaline, you are operating on a survival level, not a strategic one.
So if you're in that state, and you're trying to understand the difference between, say, a cash advance item and a necessary service on a price list.
Or just comparing the price list from 3 different funeral homes.
Yeah, all while your memory and your decision-making speed are measurably reduced, you are just guaranteeing maximum stress and financial strain at the highest possible chance of future regret over these rushed, poorly informed choices.
The material makes it crystal clear. The urgency of having to make decisions during grief is the primary antagonist in this whole story. The funeral timeline does not wait for you to feel better. Decisions about what to do with the body often have to be made within a day or two, and those lead to irreversible actions that you took under immense pressure.
And that is precisely why getting this knowledge beforehand, when the emotional stakes are zero, is such a powerful investment in your own future resilience.
Exactly. You need reliable facts and some kind of structure the most when you have the absolute least emotional and cognitive capacity to go out and find them yourself.
That realization that you're at your most vulnerable and your most urgent at the exact same time. That brings us to the solution that our source material talks about. It's all about identifying that information gap. Families are left scrambling for answers, but they're doing it in the worst possible way. Overwhelmed, scrolling through Google, getting conflicting information, and often landing on websites that are driven by really aggressive sales tactics, not by education.
And that's the real problem, you know? It's not that there's a lack of data online. There's tons of it. It's the lack of reliable, structured, unbiased information that's been put together for a regular person.
Right, and in a format that's easy to digest and isn't trying to sell you something.
Exactly. When you're grieving, you don't need 1,000 search results. You need a trusted guide to just hand you the map.
And that's exactly the void that the Funeral Program Site podcast was created to fill. According to the source, its whole purpose is to be that reliable resource, to offer practical information proactively long before a family is overwhelmed.
It completely shifts the learning curve.
How so?
Well, it takes it from being this panic-induced scramble for information and turns it into a calm, manageable exploration you can do on your own time.
That's a critical distinction.
It is. The resource isn't designed to react to a crisis. It's designed to prevent the logistical chaos of one. It's a preemptive educational tool.
So it tackles the big questions.
The most common, the most complex, the most emotionally charged questions that always seem to derail grieving families when they have no idea where to start. You know, they normalize the struggles. Things like, how do I even choose music for this? Or what are the rules about scattering ashes? Simple things that become huge obstacles.
Let's clarify, too, exactly what kind of information is inside the world of the Funeral Program Site. It's not just talking about loss in the abstract. It's providing these actionable, tangible tools that demystify the administrative side of honoring someone.
Right, the practical stuff.
The very practical stuff. We're talking about things like guidance on choosing the right readings for a service, how to select pallbearers, and crucially, it provides resources like customizable program templates, thank you notes, and guides for ordering the stationery.
That's fascinating because it gets into the physical and administrative tasks that so often get overlooked in these big discussions.
Totally.
A funeral program, I mean, the actual printed document they hand out at the service, it seems like a small thing, but it's a lasting memento. And trying to design one from scratch often becomes this major time sink when a family has absolutely zero time to spare.
Right. You're trying to figure out Microsoft Word while your world is falling apart.
Exactly. So by providing templates and guides, the resource helps you mentally organize that specific administrative burden ahead of time. It makes it feel less intimidating.
And that's exactly why I think, and this is something Alex, feel pretty strongly about, the Funeral Program Site podcast exists to be that place you can trust when everything feels completely and totally unfamiliar. It tries to demystify that whole labyrinth of decisions.
One of the biggest ones.
Yeah, like the choice of disposition, down to the smallest ones. Like, what do you even write on the thank you cards?
So its core purpose, then, is really defined by the needs that real families have. It's not theoretical. They'll cover the difference between a traditional funeral and, say, a celebration of life, the financial implications of choosing a casket versus an alternative container, how to handle the timeline for all the estate paperwork, and even modern things like creating digital memorials or setting up online tribute pages. By building this practical foundation, they're making sure you are never, ever starting from zero. This proactive listening, this consumption of knowledge, it acts as a powerful deterrent against panic later on.
Okay, so now we have to circle back and tackle that psychological hurdle again.
Yeah.
Because this is the moment where I think a lot of listeners might put up that defensive wall.
The avoidance instinct kicks in.
It does. So if you feel that urge to tune out right now, just stop and consider this key phrase that the material really reinforces. This podcast isn't about expecting loss. It's about being ready when life happens.
That's it.
It's about a preparation that brings clarity, not anxiety.
And that shift in framing it's pivotal. We're not talking about doom scrolling the future. We are talking about doing preventative maintenance for your emotional and logistical life.
That's a great way to put it.
When you engage with this information, you are trading potential helplessness for guaranteed empowerment. This is not doom and gloom. It is proactive peace of mind.
So let's break down what this advanced knowledge actually tangibly gives you. The sources really emphasize specific areas where just being ignorant costs you time, money, and a ton of emotional energy. The first one is just understanding the funeral options, and I mean all of them. Most people, I think, they only think of two things, traditional burial or cremation.
Right.
But the landscape is actually much, much broader than that.
It really is. And having that advanced knowledge means you understand concepts like direct disposition, where the body is handled immediately with no viewing or service, versus a traditional funeral with embalming and a viewing.
And what about newer options?
It also means knowing about emerging options, things like green burial, water cremation, which is technically called alkaline hydrolysis, or even body donation to science. When you know all of these choices exist, you can actually select the one that genuinely aligns with your loved one's values and, importantly, your family's financial reality.
Instead of just picking the one that's most heavily marketed to you.
Precisely.
And then there's this crucial element of legal rights and financial protection. The source material strongly implies that just understanding the laws that govern funeral service providers is your greatest weapon against being oversold.
This is where we can get into some specifics that are really powerful.
Okay.
For example, did you know that there's something called the FTC funeral rule? It requires all funeral providers to give you a detailed general price list, the GPL, if you ask for it.
And why is that so important?
It's crucial. This rule was created specifically to stop providers from forcing consumers into these expensive, non-negotiable bundled packages during a time of grief. Knowing about the GPL ahead of time allows you to itemize services and costs. You can often save thousands of dollars just by refusing items that are optional.
Like what? What's an example of an optional item?
A big one is an expensive protective vault for the casket. It's often not legally required by the state, just by the cemetery.
And I can absolutely relate to that feeling of financial and emotional chaos when you're starting from zero. When my grandmother passed away, the family was already really divided and just heartbroken. And because none of us had any prior knowledge of the process, and I mean zero, we walked into the funeral director's office and we were just completely overwhelmed by the jargon, the options. We felt this immense pressure to do the right thing.
And in that moment, what did do the right thing feel like it meant?
In our minds, it translated to buy the most expensive option they present to you. So we ended up agreeing to a viewing, a really expensive casket, and several other services that we later realized were completely optional. And frankly, they didn't reflect her simple nature or our family's financial reality at all.
So you rushed into it.
We agreed to services and costs because we didn't know what was essential versus what was optional. We rushed because we felt this pressure to honor her, but we didn't even know what the right questions were to ask. We were just operating purely out of emotional urgency and complete financial ignorance.
And the result?
the potential for this long-term regret that came from that rushed, expensive choice.
Yeah.
It became a whole new layer of difficulty for the family to deal with later on.
That anecdote perfectly illustrates the central point of the source material. That feeling of being rushed, of confusion, and the financial or emotional regret that comes from it. That is the universal consequence of starting the learning process at the worst possible moment. Knowing your options, just understanding the difference between necessary items like the basic service fee and optional items like embalming, which might not even be required depending on the timeline, it provides this psychological and financial buffer.
It just reduces the probability of that really common regret, spending way too much, or choosing a service that just didn't feel authentic to the person who died, or just feeling victimized by the speed and the emotional weight of it all.
By having the terminology demystified and the expectations set ahead of time, the emotional urgency is still there. Of course, the grief is still present, but the logistical panic is minimized. This knowledge transforms a moment of potential crisis into a manageable administrative task.
Which lets the family focus their energy where it really matters.
Exactly, on supporting each other and on grieving.
So let's talk about trust. Because when you're desperately searching for information under that kind of pressure, you are navigating a landscape where, unfortunately, a lot of the sources are not benign. I mean, the funeral industry isn't inherently malicious, but at the end of the day, it is a complex, high-stakes financial transaction. And it's one that you're making at a moment of profound vulnerability.
And that's the critical risk the source identifies. Not all the information you find online is going to be accurate or current or unbiased. The consumer is just inherently vulnerable because you're making these significant, immediate financial decisions without the emotional stability or the time to do proper due diligence.
You can't price compare. You don't have time to really understand the services.
No. And when people are grieving, they're particularly susceptible to pressure, whether it's internal pressure, driven by guilt, or external pressure from a provider.
There's that fear of disrespecting the person who died if you question a recommendation or choose a less expensive option.
Exactly. And that lack of preparatory knowledge just leaves you wide open to unnecessary spending.
So how do you combat that?
Well, you need to understand where the financial pressure comes from. Providers often use industry jargon and, frankly, emotional upselling. Let's take that concept of a casket vault or a graveside liner again. Many people believe these are legally required to stop the ground from sinking. But in most places, they are optional purchases intended only to maintain the aesthetic of the cemetery grounds.
Right, so it's for the lawnmower, basically.
Pretty much. But a grieving person, without that knowledge, they're going to hear the words ground integrity and feel morally obligated to buy it. They don't want to fail their loved one.
Exactly. Or the upselling of embalming services.
Mm-hmm.
Embalming is often presented as if it's just standard procedure. But if the disposition is quick, like within 24 to 48 hours for a direct cremation, or if the local laws don't require it, that service is purely optional.
But it comes with a significant price tag.
A very significant price tag. And it involves chemical procedures the family may not even actually want if they knew they had a choice.
And this is where the Funeral Program Site podcast's trust proposition, as our material details it, becomes so valuable. It positions itself specifically as this educational counterpoint to industry pressure.
It's built on experience.
On a real first-hand experience dealing with these situations. So the advice is grounded in practical realities, not in guesswork or some industry advertising spin.
It's focused entirely on education, on stripping away that confusing industry jargon. Terms like transfer of remains or cemetery perpetual care fund or committal service. That language is often used to establish the provider's authority and make you more dependent on them. A reliable resource just translates it. It makes the whole process transparent and manageable.
And by focusing on education, the podcast empowers families to understand two really crucial things. First, what's normal? What are the standard legal requirements and common practices? Like the need for all those certified death certificates to access assets and finalize the estate.
Right. And second?
Second, what's flexible? What are the optional services, the customizable elements, the areas where you have genuine financial and personal choice?
And the ultimate goal, as the source points out, is to help families truly honor a loved one without feeling rushed or financially strained or like they were taken advantage of during their lowest point.
And that empowerment, it literally translates into financial and emotional protection that's delivered through knowledge.
That protective function is just so key.
It is. Families follow the Funeral Program Site podcast because it's built on real experience, not guesswork. If you understand the menu of options before you walk in, you enter that meeting as an informed consumer. You're able to ask targeted questions about the GPL, you can clarify if an item is legally required, and you can choose what genuinely honors your loved one without falling for emotional upselling.
Okay, let's go a little deeper into the psychological impact of having this knowledge already in your head. We touched on the cognitive function, but it's important to understand just how profoundly grief disrupts your entire system. Trying to learn the difference between immediate and direct disposition, or a pricing structure, or the necessary forms you need to fill out while your brain is just soaked in stress hormones and acute sorrow, it isn't just difficult. It is an unsustainable and self-defeating burden.
And it's helpful to understand this from a neurological perspective. We mentioned the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that manages our working memory and executive decision-making. Grief hits it hard.
Right.
Studies suggest that during acute grief, your short-term memory retrieval and the speed of complex decision-making can be substantially impaired. This is why people forget simple things or find basic forms completely baffling. It's a real physiological thing.
That's the idea of cognitive load, right?
Exactly.
When you're grieving, your cognitive load is already maxed out. Just managing the emotional reality of it all. Just getting out of bed, eating, basic self-care.
Yeah, the basics are hard enough.
So if you then add the task of consuming and synthesizing entirely new, complex logistical data, which is what planning a funeral is, you move beyond simple stress and into guaranteed mental exhaustion and panic.
And that is precisely where the value of familiarity provides this critical grounding. If you've already absorbed the basics, even just passively, by listening to a reliable resource like this, that information moves from being difficult, new, short-term memory processing to a more established knowledge base in your head. So when the crisis arrives, you don't have to learn the system, you just have to access the framework you already know.
The knowledge acts like a mental flowchart.
That's a great way to think of it.
You might be completely emotionally lost, but you have the steps. Okay, first, we secure the time of death and notify authorities. Second, locate the will or any disposition wishes. Third, contact the funeral provider and ask for the general price list. That sense of familiarity provides these crucial anchors in a stormy sea of grief.
Think about the immediate practical steps, like the administrative stuff. One of the biggest logistical headaches families face is the need for certified death certificates.
Oh, yeah.
You need them for everything. To access life insurance, to close bank accounts, manage investments, finalize the estate. And so often, families realize way too late that they need 10 or 15 certified copies.
And then getting them is a whole process.
It can be a frustrating and slow process if you don't know the exact procedure or who even issues them in your state, which is usually the Vital Records Office.
So if you already know that simple fact that you need a bunch of certified death certificates and you know who to call to get them, you have just removed a massive, complex roadblock at a time when your capacity is at its lowest.
It's the difference between walking into a pitch-dark room for the very first time and walking into that same room but knowing exactly where the light switch is.
Right, where the furniture is and where the most important documents are stored.
The goal here is never to remove the pain of loss. That is fundamentally impossible. The goal is to remove the secondary pain, the pain caused by logistical chaos, financial confusion, and rushed decisions.
So when the time comes, you're not starting from zero.
You are not starting from zero. You are already informed, you're equipped, and that foundational knowledge makes one of life's hardest moments feel just a little bit more manageable. It transforms the experience from a total breakdown into a managed crisis.
And now, let's expand this idea outwardly, because this preparation is also, it's intensely selfless. This knowledge doesn't just benefit you, the individual listener. It benefits your entire support network, your spouse, your children, your siblings. The source explicitly calls this type of information gathering a powerful form of self-care and care for the people you love.
And that framing is so beautiful because it highlights the generous investment you're making.
Yeah.
By proactively taking on this burden of knowledge yourself, you are effectively lightening the load for every other family member when a loss happens.
You're creating emotional capacity for others.
Yes, you're allowing them to grieve more fully rather than forcing them into these administrative roles they are completely unprepared to handle.
And just think about the dynamics of a family unit during grief. Everyone is hurting, and sometimes people grieve in really different, conflicting ways.
Oh, absolutely.
That heightened emotional state, combined with the stress of making these immediate logistical decisions, it is a recipe for conflict. Disagreements can just flare up over the method of disposition, the cost, or even the type of ceremony. Does Dad deserve a simple send-off or a grand celebration?
And the informed person, the one who has absorbed this structured material from a trusted resource, they can step in as the steady voice in the room.
They're not just reacting.
No, they're not reacting based on raw subjective emotion or guessing which vendor to trust. They are reacting based on known facts, on legal realities, and on options they already understand.
And that allows them to perform this crucial mediating function. They can gently guide the conversation. They can say, look, we know legally we have these three options, or the budget allows for X services and Y services are optional according to the GPL. They can explain the standard procedures, they can clarify the timelines, and they can help mediate these really difficult family decisions with less conflict and way more clarity. That stability is just priceless when other people are paralyzed.
And beyond that, this preparedness equips you for the long administrative haul. The funeral itself, those immediate decisions, that's just the beginning.
Right.
The informed person is better equipped to manage the whole estate settlement timeline, which can involve probate, asset distribution, tax filings, legal notifications. Just knowing the general order of operations, what tasks can be delegated and what has to wait for the death certificate, it allows the family to move forward systematically. It reduces the risk of administrative errors or costly legal delays.
It lets you shift your role.
Right.
You go from being another paralyzed co-griever to being a pillar of practical guidance. You can provide structure when other people can only see chaos.
Right. You can be the one to say.
You can say, I know this is incredibly hard, but here are the three options we talked about before, and here are the only two questions we actually need to answer today to move forward.
Following a resource like the Funeral Program Site podcast really equips the listener not just to protect themselves, financially and emotionally, but to actively help others. It transforms knowledge into this actionable display of love and support.
It provides practical grounding when others are just too emotionally overwhelmed to function.
It truly changes the emotional tenor of the whole situation, from total chaos to managed crisis.
And that competence, that ability to handle the logistics with care, that might be the greatest gift you can give your loved ones during their time of deepest need. So that brings us to our final synthesis. We've spent this time detailing why the universal avoidance of this topic, death, grief, and all the logistics, is so natural. But we've also established that this avoidance is a vulnerability. It's one that guarantees maximum stress, financial exposure, and logistical chaos when the inevitable happens.
And by gaining this preparatory knowledge today, you're essentially investing in future clarity. You are making sure that when you face one of life's most profoundly difficult tasks, honoring a loved one and managing the aftermath, you do it from a position of empowerment, supported by facts, rather than reeling in confusion and panic.
This is knowledge you may not need today, but it will be incredibly valuable when the time comes. It allows you to move through grief, focusing on the necessary emotional weight of your loss, rather than the confusing and unnecessary weight of administrative logistics. You trade potential regret for calculated peace.
Ultimately, the source material really compels us to remember this one thing. It's knowledge no one wants to need, but everyone is grateful to have. It transforms the necessary act of remembering into an act of clarity and strength.
You don't follow the Funeral Program Site podcast because you need it today. You follow it so that when the day comes, and it will, you already know where to turn. That foundation, built calmly and without pressure, is your greatest defense against the chaos of grief.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into a profoundly important, though often overlooked, topic of preparation and proactive care.
Tune in next time for more essential insights and unexpected knowledge. And remember, you can follow the Funeral Program Site podcast on all major streaming platforms: iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Spotify, and Amazon Music.